The third part of question 1 from 2015 deals with you scanning over an array and comparing and dealing and being able to determine whether or not an array, a two-dimensional array, is what they call diverse. Now it says a two-dimensional array is diverse if no two rows have entries that sum to the same value. So if there are identical row sums, it is not diverse, and if there are not identical row sums, it is diverse. So, okay, we have to compare the sums of all the rows to each other. Now, this is kind of it's similar in some ways to sorting. You have to just compare all the elements to each other. So, static Boolean this time, we're going to return true or false, depending on whether or not we find a diverse array or not. So, is diverse is the name of the method, and it takes a two-dimensional array of integers. And we'll just call this array2d again. And in this case, because we start with a return type, always, we need to create a Boolean called isDiverse. And we'll set it initially to true. So we're going to assume that an array is diverse unless we find out otherwise. And then at the end, we'll return true. So now we're testing for non-diversity, which means we're testing for whether or not we encounter a situation where an array is not diverse, in which case we'll flip the value of that Boolean. So we need to keep track of the sums, so we need to get the sums of all the rows first. Luckily we have a method that does that, so int sums equals row sums, and we send row sums, our method, the 2D array. So you can always assume in part C assumes that part B, this row sums method, works correctly. So you need to know that you can make use of it. So then we just need to create a nested loop. Now we're going to look at each element and compare it to all the remaining elements. And anytime we encounter two that are the same, we flip isDiverse to false. Because if only one of the elements is the same as another element, isDiverse should be flipped to false. We don't need to do anything if they're different. So for int I equals 0, I is less than sums.length. So we're going to look at every sum, I++. Then our interior loop needs to start at I plus 1, so like one above each element. So if you imagine, say our sums came out to something like, I don't know, 22, 45, 54, 22, and 64. So we're going to start, our outer loop I is going to go over each of the elements and compare them to every element above. And our inner loop is going to start at one above I so that it can compare each, so that it compares them to, so 22 is compared to 45, 54, 22, and 64. Then we go up to 45 and we compare them to all the rest, 54 and compare them to all the rest. So it needs to start at, int j is going to start at I plus 1, plus 1, and it's going to go to until j is no longer less than sums.length, j++, and this can actually be -1 because we don't need to test the final element against anything. And we're going to just say if sums at I equals sums at j, we need to flip the value of isDiverse from true to false. isDiverse equals false. And at the end, just return it. So if we ever encounter a situation in which there are equal sums, isDiverse becomes false because the array is not diverse. So initially we set it to true. We assume that the array is diverse. We look for instances of non-diversity, and we return whatever the value is at the end. And that's it for this method.